Good evening. Oh, it's wonderful to be here again. It really is. It's something we look forward to more and more each year. It seems also more difficult to stay away each year. But the work is unfolding here in England beautifully. And it's a joy to watch it. It's a joy to have the experience with those students whose progress is so evident. For this reason, I'm particularly glad that just we are here together tonight. You perhaps remember that this is our 8th year. And that is 8th year of our work in England. And probably all of you in this room have been with us nearly all of that time. And so by now you are able to know to what degree the infinite way is molding your lives or changing your lives or improving them. Only you can look back on these years and know whether or not you are deriving from your study and meditation that which you had hoped for. Each one of us who comes to a religious teaching or spiritual teaching has some goal in mind, something that we are seeking. Perhaps in our earlier years, when we were starting in some metaphysical study, we had in mind only the gaining of health, or the gaining of supply, or the gaining of companionship, or some other human demonstration. And this was a legitimate reason for our coming to a study. It was an acknowledgement that our old religions, if we had any, or our lack of religion, those of us who had none, that all of these had failed us, that they had not met our need, and therefore we were looking in radically new directions. And anyone who came out of orthodoxy into any of the metaphysical teachings was most certainly looking in radical, strange fields for their good. And those who came out of backgrounds of no religious conviction were perhaps equally in strange fields. Many of us found in our metaphysical study healings of one nature or another, physical or mental or moral or financial, or human relationships or companionships or home, and then found that even after we had made our so-called demonstration, that we still were not at peace, were not happy, were not content. We had not found that for which every individual in the world is seeking, even when they do not know it. And it is for this reason that we kept searching and kept going from one teaching to another. And then, as in the case with us, we found our way in the study and practice of the infinite way. So the question comes after these years, what was my goal when I came to this study? And to what extent am I being fulfilled? To what extent is it meeting my need? Have I come to a place in my experience where I know that this is the way for me beyond all question, when I can burn all of the bridges behind me? Or have I come to a place where I must acknowledge that this has not met my need and that I should go on and look further? Or some may be at that place where they do realize that this is the way, yet it has not yet fulfilled itself in their experience, and something is missing, something is lacking. Now, no one message is ever meant for everybody, and there never will be a message on the face of the earth that will meet the needs of everybody, because we are all different states and stages of consciousness. The only time we will come into agreement on a teaching is when we have gone beyond the need of any teaching. Then we will find that we are all united in one wonderful agreement as to the name and the nature of God. Until that time, each of us must find our goal in one way or another, but we must be sure before we start that we know what our goal is. By now, you realize that the nature of this message is that we are seeking spiritual illumination, that we are seeking the realization or the attainment of the fourth dimension of life. That is our particular goal. We are not seeking health. We are not seeking supply. We are not seeking better business or the sale of property. We are not seeking better morals. We are seeking the kingdom of God, the realm or the realization of spiritual being. The longer we search and the harder we search, the greater degree of harmony will come into our experience. The physical harmonies and the mental and the moral and the financial and the human relationships. But these are not the goal. These are the added things. The goal always remains the same: illumination, realization, attainment. When this message was first presented, the manuscript of the book The Infinite Way was considered so radical that no publisher would publish it. It was considered too idealistic and too impractical. Since that time, as you know, it has been published in many languages and by some of our very best of publishers in the United States and England, Holland, Germany, Switzerland, and this year starting in Japan, of all places, Japan right now. As we work with this message, many new revelations unfold, things that we have heard about, maybe read about, never realized. And some of these, when the realization takes place, makes us seem kind of foolish that we hadn't thought about it before because it was so simple. I have told you in classes about my experience with that statement that is found on the walls of all Christian Science churches. Divine love always has met and always will meet every human need. Many times I've looked at that sign and wondered why Mrs. Eddy insisted that it be placed in every church, because, well, judging from appearances, it wasn't a true statement, because I knew so many of the people in the churches, and I was pretty sure from what I knew that divine love hadn't yet met their need. Yet it said always has met and always will meet. But there were so many cases where I knew that wasn't so. And I wondered why that statement, what was behind it. And one night, puzzling for a whole hour about it, all of a sudden the inner meaning dawned. And I saw why she had placed it there, and I saw the rightness of it. Wondered that it hadn't been explained. Reading the sign, as it seems to read, one would think that there is a divine love somewhere that is going to meet our human need, or always has met our human need, but it doesn't mean that at all. The divine love that meets our human need is the love that finds expression through us. It's the divine love that we release. In other words, it is in the degree that we learn to forgive our enemies or to pray for our enemies. It is in the degree that we are able to forgive 70 times 7. It is in the degree that we are able to dispense our philanthropy not only to our friends, not only to those who have the same religious belief that we do, but actually to share our tithe, our benevolences, with those of any faith or every faith or no faith. Not asking them even whether they have a faith, but asking only, do they have a need? And can we help to fulfill it? In other words, the degree of impersonal and impartial love that we can permit to flow out through us is the love that meets our need. There isn't any love out here in this room. The only love there is in this room is the love that is flowing back and forth between you and me, and back and forth to and from each other. There is no other love in this room. This room is completely empty of love. It is only the love that finds expression through us that fills this room. In the same way, there isn't an iota of hate in this room. But that doesn't mean that the next group that comes in here cannot jump at each other's throat, because it will depend upon what they bring into the room. They are not going to find anything here. And that is what the Master meant when he said, you need not worship in holy mountains, nor in that holy temple in Jerusalem. The kingdom of God is neither low here nor low there. The kingdom of God is within you. You are not going to find God in a holy mountain. You are not going to find God in a holy temple. You can bring God to a holy mountain or an unholy mountain. You can bring God to an unholy mountain and make it holy. You can bring God into a lion's cage and make the lions tame. But you can't find God there. You bring God there. You bring love. You bring peace. You can't find peace by going to any country on the face of the globe, and you never could. You bring peace and then find it. But you bring it in order that you may find it. For what you do not bring is not there. So it is that just recently I have had an unfoldment on something that makes me feel rather ashamed to admit, because I should have known it several hundred years ago. But I will admit to you that I have wondered for a great many years about this statement that love is the healer. I've wondered about that because I've known a lot of loving people who weren't healed. And I've wondered, what does this mean? And I don't only mean humanly loving people, but those who have caught a measure of spiritual love, impersonal love, universal love. And even with that, healings have not taken place. And so it is only very, very recently that the light dawned and realization came. Love is the healer, the love of God. To love God supremely, to love the Lord thy God with all thy heart and with all thy soul. To love God so that it is not lip service, so that it is not a metaphysical cliche, so that it is actually a feeling within one. This is a healing agency. This really is a release or an overcoming of what the Master called this world. Love is a liberator, but love of money isn't, and love of position isn't, and love of one's family isn't. It's love of God. Oh, almost every mother on the face of the globe loves her family, and most fathers. But that isn't a healing agency. Many, many love their neighbors, but to love God is the secret, and it is the answer of the entire subject of love. And wherever love is mentioned, it really means love of God, or the love of neighbor, which is a love of God. In other words, to love one's neighbor purely from the standpoint that in loving my neighbor I am loving God, for those who say they love God, whom they have not seen, but do not love their fellow man whom they have seen, they are liars. Therefore, to be able to love our fellow man not for his sake, but because in loving him we are loving God who constitutes his being, the being of man. God who is the creative principle of man, the Father. So it is then that as we walk this path of the infinite way, you will find out how little you know of spiritual truth. Don't think I mean just you, for I'm always discovering how little I know. The spiritual truth is of such a nature and such a depth that it isn't given to any one of us to know but a grain of it at a time, and to have this grain reveal itself little by little, and usually with pains and problems. Not with successes. We are apt to sit back in those successes and lean back in them. The depth of our spiritual realization does not come in the years of our affluence and health, but in the years of our problems, the problems that force us out of our humanhood, force us to a place beyond the realm of the human mind. Yes, I can put it in these words. Everyone believes that they have some knowledge of God. And as long as they believe that, they have no knowledge of God. They are devoid of knowledge of God as long as there is a trace of belief that they have some knowledge of God. No one has even caught the first glimpse of God until they have reached that point in which they recognize that any bit of knowledge they ever had was wrong, and necessarily had to be wrong, because whatever their knowledge was represented only a concept that someone had passed on to them, or a concept they formed by reading something, an image in their own mind. In other words, any time we believe we understand God, it means we have an image of God that we have created. And so we've fallen in love with our own image, the image that we created. Not knowing sometimes we've created a monster, even when we call it God. You see, it is not possible with the human mind to know God. It is not possible to entertain a concept of God that is correct. We can know something of the nature of God, as when John says that God is love. That is not knowing God, remember. That is merely knowing the nature of God. In other words, when we say God is love, we are also saying that God does not create sin, or God does not create disease, or God never created death. When we say God is love, we are at the same time saying that God is not responsible for any of the ills that exist on the face of the earth. They are entirely man-made. This is not knowing God. This is merely knowing something of the nature of God. And we can know that because it is revealed to us. And it has been revealed to us through the mystics of all ages that God has never created a disease of any name or nature on the face of the globe. God has never been responsible for age. God has never caused a death in the entire history of the world. God couldn't do those things and be love. Nor could God do those things and be life, life eternal. For in life eternal there can be no death or awareness of death or responsibility for death. And so it is that we can overcome many of the false concepts of God that we have entertained because of previous religious beliefs. But all of that does not yet bring us into a knowledge of God. And of course, it never is possible to have a knowledge of God, because that would mean that we are encompassing infinite God in a finite mind or finite consciousness or finite understanding, and that would be impossible. But we can, as we continue our studies and our meditations, we can rise to that place, and I have quoted this to you before, of Maimonides, who said that if you say God is great, or God is love, or God is all, or God is infinite, you are saying no more than when you say God is. And so it is possible through study, through meditation, it is possible through catching glimpses, not of what's written in books, but what lies between the lines of what's written in books. It is possible to catch the vision at last. God is, and that is enough for me to know, and not try with the human mind to encompass God, but to relax in the assurance that God is. Now, in the same way, in this past year, I have been working with students for a greater understanding of the nature of supply. Not because we want to go out and get more dollars or pounds, but because in understanding the nature of supply, the dollars and the pounds come in to take care of themselves and the obligations and leave us free for other matters. And here again, as with this word love, meaning love God, so the word gratitude came into the picture, and I couldn't help smiling in remembering how many articles I have read saying that gratitude is one of the best means of demonstrating supply. And then I also remembered all the people I know who are very grateful for everything and for everyone, and who have not yet encompassed that subject of supply. And I saw this vision of gratitude. Gratitude not meaning thankfulness for what has come to me. Gratitude not meaning thankfulness for what has come to you. Not that type of gratitude at all. But in one vision, looking out of the window, I saw the leaves and the fruit on the trees, and I caught my first glimpse of a true gratitude. A gratitude that there was a principle that put them there. A gratitude that, regardless of how barren those trees might look at some parts of the year, that there is a law at work, a life at work, a presence at work. And in its due season, there would be green grass again. And there would be buds, and there would be blossoms, and there would be fruit. And all of a sudden, gratitude opened as having nothing to do with thankfulness for what I had, merely a gratitude that this earth, if every man were blown off of it, as he may well be, in the very next instant he'd start to be created again. The principle behind this universe would instantly start new blossoms, new fruit, and new men and new women forth into the world. And everything that had passed out would have been nothing more than the old leaves or the old branches or the old bodies. But the life would immediately be living again, fresh and new. And nothing gone but yesterday, as yesterdays always must go. Now, in the months that have passed by since that vision came, I can tell you that that vision itself has changed my life. It has changed something inside of me, because I no longer have any personal sense of gratitude. I no longer have any sense of gratitude for anything that has to do with my life, or any good that's come into my life or your life, because it is so clear to me that if there weren't any me or there weren't any you, there still would be this power, this presence, this life, this law pouring itself forth for all of mankind, for all of the generations to come. The fact that we in our generation have been fooled, just like the men and women of previous generations has nothing to do with God or God's government of his universe. Just as civilizations have been destroyed, entire civilizations, entire nations have been destroyed, and in their places others have grown, showing that God's life has continually gone forward, and that art and literature and music have continued to flourish all through these generations, even after man has been destroyed, shows us that when a generation finally comes along, steeped in spiritual wisdom, there will no longer be any need for nations to be wiped out, for civilizations to be wiped out. And those who can read history objectively can see where we ourselves have been responsible for the very conditions that today threaten to wreck another civilization and another group of nations. And I don't know how anyone could be advanced at all in spiritual understanding and not see the human mistakes that this generation and the last generation and the one before it made, that made today's conditions inevitable. There is no use complaining about it, but there is a use of acknowledging it so that we may not remain obstinate in our stupidity and continue these things onto more generations. One thing is certain. The basic cause of all the evil in the world has been that in our generations, back for a couple of thousand years, God has only entered into the picture as some kind of a supreme St. Nicholas, Santa Claus, to whom we go for things and whom we appease in order to get these things. Whether we go to temple on Saturday or church on Sunday, or whether we don't eat meat on Friday or abstain from meat altogether, the main purpose of it all has been appeasing God, to gain God's favor, to gain God's grace for the purpose of getting. So it has been that even in our more enlightened metaphysical and spiritual life, we have thought of God as a means to an end. Through God I will get my health or my supply or my peace. Through God I will get. And of course that has been the barrier to our getting it. Not realizing that God is not a super parent that is sitting around with a box of chocolates withholding it. God is not a super being with a sack full of toys that in some way we can coerce away from him. It is only now, in this very present decade, that we are beginning to understand that there is no getting of anything from God. The only getting there is getting God. Seeking and finding the realm of God, the consciousness of God, the realization of God, and keeping our mind off of what we shall eat or what we shall drink and wherewithal we shall be clothed, and seeking God alone. Now, I say this not in any sense of blaming any of us. Do not forget that we have been mistaught these thousands of years, these false teachings have been handed to us, and as a rule, when we were children and had no thinking capacity, and along with those teachings, we were also taught not to doubt them or we might end up in hell. And therefore, even the privilege of thinking was taken away from us. Now, the privilege of thinking is being restored to us. And we are being told that you can even doubt anything or everything you ever knew, until you begin to have revelations of your own, not based on what somebody told you, but based on what experience brought you from within your own being. The Master tried it 2,000 years ago to say to his people, the kingdom of God is within you. And that man was not made for the Sabbath, and God has no pleasure in your sacrifices. He tried to tell us then that we were on the wrong track in our religious worship, but we persisted in the sacrifices and in the Sabbath and in the holy mountains and in the holy temples and in all the things that he warned us about. But the thing that we might have heeded that could have set aside even those mistakes, praying for our enemies, forgiving 70 times 7, and not taking up the sword, these we ignored too, as if we intended to make it 100% denial of the Christ. Now we are facing a period of history far different than World War I, when they merely told us that democracy and Christianity were being threatened. Now I think we could well afford to trade and just lose our democracy and our Christianity if we could save some of the other things that we are being threatened with. But no, today we are faced with a situation in life where not merely lip service to democracy and lip service to Christianity are in danger, but actual democracy and actual Christianity and actual physical freedom and mental freedom and the human sense of life itself, all of these are threatened today, and threatened from many different directions, not just one. There was a time when life was very uncomplicated. If you just overcame the Kaiser, all would be well. And then later, if you could just overcome Hitler, all was going to be well. Life isn't that simple today. Today we are faced with danger from a dozen different sources, 3 major ones. And the question now is this. 1, is there any way at all that can avert this threat that is hanging over the heads of mankind? And secondly, if not, is there any way of demonstrating that though 1,000 fall at my left and 10,000 at my right, that it will not come nigh me? There are 2 big questions that are placed before us. Now, one thing I'm sure you will agree, there isn't any use of looking for any greater forces and powers than we already have. There's no use searching around for something stronger than the atomic bomb or the nuclear fission or the long-distance missiles. There's no use looking for greater powers than other countries have. I think we can all agree that every country has all of the great powers. We're pretty equal in that. And that it really would make no difference which one threw it. The end would be the same for all of us. So the answer doesn't lie in idly dreaming or even scientifically dreaming up a new power greater than nuclear power. Therefore, I think that with us it can be agreed that power isn't the answer. And so we can turn to the next thing. If power isn't the answer, what is? And that is going to be a subject for your meditation, because we have a long period ahead of us here in England this trip. We have a lecture series, we have a class, and we have still another class, and then we have more work up in Manchester. Oh, we have about 6 weeks here in which we can begin to meditate on this subject. There must be a way that this world can be saved, and it isn't the way of power, and it isn't taking up the sword. Let us all agree here that if the free nations of the world were in danger, that every single one of us would be on our toes to do whatever could be for our defense or our neighbor's defense or our nation's defense. We would have to be, because there's no other way out if there's to be survival. But that would merely be a rendering unto Caesar the things that are Caesar's. That would not be a solution of the world's problems. We are dealing in our work with the solution of the world's problems. Why? If you individually have advanced, if you have been serious, you have already seen that the principles that are embodied in this message do bring a greater harmony to you or me individually. They do bring peace. They do bring a greater sense of abundance. They do bring a happier human relationship among us and among our families and friends and neighbors. And if you look back over the years of your study, I'm sure you'll find that you've had some measure of better health too. So that I don't think the question comes up as to whether we alone can benefit by the infinite way. I'm sure we can see that the more we work with this message, the more we will benefit. But tell me, what benefit would it be to us if we saw the world go down in chaos? Are we that cold to our neighbors and to our fellow countrymen and our countrymen across the sea and our sons of God all around the world, that we could say, well, I'm very happy it won't come nigh my dwelling place? I don't think that can be. Any more than I think that we could be, at this stage of our spiritual unfoldment, I don't think we could be very happy even if we made a demonstration of 1 million and found that our families and our friends and relatives weren't making that demonstration, and that we had to enjoy that 1 million all by ourselves or just make charity patients of them. I don't think we would gain much happiness with our 1 million. I know we wouldn't. So it is that our ultimate joy and peace can only come if we can have some measure of conviction that this spiritual way we are traveling has a solution for the world, has a solution for the free world, and making free that part of the world that isn't now free. Because the world that's in slavery, be assured, they are no more responsible for their being in slavery that we're responsible for being in danger of losing our freedom, except our ignorance. And it's their ignorance that brought this upon them, not their sins, for their sins are no greater than our sins. It's their ignorance and our ignorance. We've had a little more luck than they have in staving it off for a while. But the solution hasn't come yet. And now the subject of our meditation throughout this entire period of our work must be. I know that force and power, might and power, is not the answer. Freedom, liberty, health, justice does not come by might or by power. We have witnessed the power of navies, and we've witnessed the power of air forces, and we've witnessed the power of submarines, and none of these have established peace on earth. Now, there must be another way. This must be the age of the Christ, for we have reached the limit of material power. And you know, it is our experience in this work that healing work is very difficult among people who are dividing themselves between their spiritual study and materia medica. The reason is they're a house divided against themselves. And you'd be surprised how much easier it is to heal so-called incurable diseases. Once the doctor has said, there's nothing more I can do, this is the end. Oh, it seems so easy then for us to raise them up. Because there is no longer a divided thought, a divided household. There's no longer a holding on to a piece of matter and hoping that God will do something. There comes in that last moment a complete release from all material remedies and a sort of final, oh God, it's now or never. And usually it's now. Well, so it is. As long as there was hope that the world could find an atomic bomb or a hydrogen bomb or a long-distance missile, there was always hope. As long as there was a hope that we could keep our secret secret, there was hope. But all of this is taken from us now. All of this. We know now that for every ounce of material power that we have, the so-called enemy also has it. And we know something alarming, that while we have gone too far in civilization ever to use it, they haven't. That's something to think about. So that this is the day when your materia power man must say to you, we've done everything for you, and nothing more can be done for you humanly or with power, and now do you have something else beyond power? If you read your 4 Gospels, you'll quickly see that there is something that is beyond power. Something that is not power at all, and yet nullifies power. It is not itself power. There is no such thing as God power, no such thing as Christ power, no such thing as spiritual power. For Christ is not power, Christ is being. God is not power, God is love. God is not power, God is life. And in these coming weeks, the entire subject of every day and of every night is going to point us to the realization of that which is not power, but dissolves power, and makes power of none effect, as the Master standing before Pilate. The great temporal power, who can crucify you or set you free, And he smiles and says, thou couldst have no power over me. See that? And that must be the state of consciousness to which we come in these coming days and weeks. The place at which we can smile inwardly and realize, why, thou couldst have no power. There is no power apart from life eternal perpetuating itself. It is a new dimension. Not new, or no. Buddha knew this dimension. Gautama, the Buddha, knew this dimension when he discovered under the Bodhi tree that all the appearance world is illusion. Here he had devoted all of these years to trying to find a remedy for sin, disease, and death. He never set out to be a healer of people's diseases. He wanted to find that which would remove sin, disease, and death from the earth, and he found there was no remedy because there was no power. All of these appearances were unreal. Maya, illusion. Therefore, they didn't need any power to destroy them. They weren't power. The Master, 500 years later, was given the self-same revelation, identical. To the crippled man, what did hinder you? Pick up your bed and walk. In other words, there's no power in that condition. To the blind man, open your eyes. Why? There's no power in that condition. In other words, all of these appearances are illusory. He even said at Lazarus' tomb, I do not have to pray. As a matter of fact, at no time during his healing work is there any evidence that he ever prayed for anybody's health. Just, what did hinder you? Open your eyes. Do you believe? And so it is that we come again at this particular period of history, and again we have revealed to us not that we are seeking a power with which to overcome sin, disease, or death, but in which we are realizing that because God is, sin, disease, and death are illusory appearances, whether they take form in your individual mind or body or in that of nations. Whatever the form of temporal power, we are again being presented with this principle that we are not seeking a power. We are realizing the non-power. The non-power of appearances. The non-power of the carnal mind. Whether the carnal mind is appearing as poverty, whether it is appearing as unemployment, whether it is appearing as hate or bigotry, whether it is appearing as a political or a religious weapon, we need no power to overcome it. We need the realization of its non-power, the non-power of the carnal mind, and then we need one thing more. We need secrecy. These are the principles that must be kept sacred and secret in consciousness, so that the Father that seeth in secret shall reward thee openly. When the parents of the Master knew that there was a threat to the babe, they didn't stand up and tell Pilate he had no power. They took the babe down to Egypt. And they hid it until it could stand on its own feet. We shall not go about the streets defying the powers of evil. we will go down to Egypt. We will go down into the darkness of our own interior being and hide our secret, our Christ realization. Thou couldst have no power over me unless it came from the Father. And we will know this morning, noon, and night within ourselves, but we will never voice it. We will never tell our secret, because it would sound as foolish as if you went up to a doctor and told him that infection is a lie and there is no such thing. And yet you've proven 1,000 times that infection is not a power. You've proven 1,000 times that disease is not a power. But think how it would sound if you told it to a doctor. And think how it would sound walking up to the Iron Curtain and saying, you have no power. Don't say it and don't even think it. Just hide within yourself this nugget of truth that has been revealed 500 BC and BC AD and now again. We are not seeking a power. We are abiding in the realization. God alone is power, and all of these appearances, which we may sum up as the carnal mind, these are not power. We are not seeking a power, for we have no need of powers. We live not by might nor by power, but by thy Spirit. And that must be our slogan, if we want to call it that, our open sesame, door opener, our password, our shibboleth. Not by might, nor by power, but by thy Spirit. And secretly and sacredly abide in that. And the Lord that seeth in secret, the Father that seeth in secret, will reward us openly. And all of our practitioners know that that is the only way in which they accomplish healing. Not by might, nor by power. Not by strong statements of truth, but by the realization of truth. That the evils of this world, which constitute the carnal mind, are not power. Throughout this year 1960, you will find in our classwork a different note than 1959. When we were sent home from Holland in 1958 and told to wait, the message that finally came was, take to the students the principles of the infinite way, these specific principles which constitute the infinite way, and see that they study them, practice them, and develop the consciousness of them. And then it was told, work with these principles for 9 months with the students, and then go on to transcendental consciousness. And you will find that beginning with our Chicago work, you have been living and moving in transcendental consciousness. And transcendental consciousness means that consciousness which does not use might or power. It is the gentle Christ that resists not evil, that puts up the sword and says, not by might nor by power, but by my Spirit, and then rests in that word. That's our program for all of our stay in England. Thank you.